So you have to put your money at work somewhere, but when you do, for the time being at least, you see that investors do it on a very defensive stance.
So Pierre, starting off, wondering if you could give us an outlook on the sector performance of the equity and the government bond yields. How have they been performing?
Okay, so there has been a very strong relation this year between interest rates, government bond yields, and the performance of different sectors in the equity market. So it is pretty striking to see that there has been a very strong performance across the board in the world for defensive sectors, whereas more cyclical sectors have experienced more difficulties to perform well, and in some cases, especially in Europe or in the US, have been very poor performers. And the most striking, of course, is in the US, where you have a very strong performance of, say, utilities, consumer staples, or telecom services, despite the fact that the economy is doing fine. So it has to be put in relation with the ultra-low level of interest rates that we've had for the last 2 to 3 years, and which has accelerated with a lot of government bonds now in the G7 countries yielding negative.
So zoning in on the US economy then, taking a look at the US equity market, would it be right to value the US equity market as, say, a risky sector?
In our view, at Notz Stucki, no, because we like the US equity market. It's very deep, and it's probably less cyclical than other markets, thanks to the very strong presence of companies like Google, Facebook, Microsoft, which are growing nicely and in non-cyclical, for most of them at least, non-cyclical activities. The fact that the US market has been a good performer this year, but with very strong difference between defensive sectors and cyclical sectors, is really mind-boggling, because there is something odd there, where you have a good economy, the US economy is doing fine, but still investors don't want to buy the riskiest part of the equity market in the US.
So we've touched on the equity market. Now, what's your outlook for the government bond yields in the near future?
So from where they are today, it's very difficult to see them going much lower, of course, because when you have most of the G7 government bond yields yielding negative, that's very surprising, something that you would not expect. But everything's possible. We have seen that on markets as a whole. But I would expect that once the Fed in the US normalizes its interest rate policy, that should put some kind of normalization for the global bond market in the world. So I would expect interest rates to go up a little bit when the Fed starts to normalize its interest rate policy by raising its interest rates probably at the end of this year.
So would you say, following on from that, that's why investors are still attracted to this area?
Yes, investors are still attracted to these very defensive sectors, and the bond market is part of it, probably because despite the fact that the US economy is doing fine, there are still a lot of questions about the rest of the world. You know about China, you know about Japan, you know about Europe, and especially more recently with the Brexit and the problems of the European banking sector. So there is still a premium for being defensive on equity markets and on the bond market as well. So that's why you see interest rates going down or staying at ultra-low level, gold going up. So there is kind of a cautious attitude from investors. You have to be invested because short-term interest rates are yielding negative or zero. So you have to put your money at work somewhere. But when you do, for the time being at least, you see that investors do it on a very defensive stance.
Fantastic. Well, Pierre, thank you so much for coming in today and sharing your insights.
You're welcome. Thank you very much, Jessica.
That's all for myself and Pierre, but if you did like this interview, do like and comment on dukascopy.tv.